right, getting into section 6.2, shifts of demand and supply curves. So today we're going to explain how a shift of the demand curve affects equilibrium price and quantity, and then a shift how the supply curve affects equilibrium price and quantity. Hold on a second. Okay, there we go. I was looking for a particular graph, but I can't seem to find it. So we will just move on. First of all, learning objective 1, shifts of the demand curve. If one of the factors that determine the demand for pizza changes in a way that increases demand, this would shift the demand curve to the right. Lots of things could shift the demand for pizza rightward. Let's just talk about some silly examples. First of all, an increase in the money income of consumers, because pizza is considered a normal good. So if we get more money, more spending money, then we will buy more pizza. It'll shift to the right. An increase in the price of a substitute, such as tacos, or a decrease in the price of a complement, such as beverages. So if the price of tacos increases, we will buy more pizzas. If the price of drinks decrease, we will have more money to buy pizzas. Number 3, a change in expectations that encourages consumers to buy more pizza. Expectations being, next week the price of pizza is going to double, so let's buy more pizza this week. This week the batch of tomato sauce is extra delicious, so let's buy more pizza, etc. Number 4, an increase in the number of pizza consumers would shift a demand curve to the right, or a change in consumer tastes in favor of pizza would shift the curve to the right. And I apologize, these are all right here. If demand is increased, the demand curve would shift rightward, and these are the reasons I just talked about. So let's talk about each one in turn. First of all, an increase in demand. Increase in demand means that consumers are now willing and able to buy more of the product at every price. That means our curve is shifting to the right. So when a curve shifts to the right, there is considered a shortage. And if you remember from last video, the shortage puts upward pressure on the price. As the price increases, quantity demanded increases along new demand curve, and quantity supplied increases along that curve. A new equilibrium point is reached. So if we look at this curve, after the demand curve shifts to the right, which is right here, that's our shift to the right, the amount demanded at the initial price of $9, so this is our initial price of $9, the amount demanded was 20 million, but now at $9, the amount demanded has increased. So at $9, the initial demand curve was 20 million, and now we are up to 30 million. Okay, let's move on. Because producers supply only 20 million pizzas at that price, we now have a shortage. Okay, this is our shortage. We now have a shortage of 10 million pizzas. There are now millions of consumers that are frustrated because they can't find pizza for $9. Producers realize they can charge more than $9 for a pizza. So a shortage puts upward pressure on the price. And there is, oh my word, that is the worst upward arrow you've ever seen. Okay, that puts an upward pressure on the price. So as price increases, the quantity demanded decreases along a new demand curve. So I have a new demand curve right here. So as price increases, quantity demanded decreases along the new demand curve, and quantity supplied increases along the curve until the two quantities are once again equal. Okay, we have a new equilibrium price. The new equilibrium price is $12, and the new equilibrium quantity, so we've got $12 and 24 million pizzas. As long as the supply curve slopes upward, a rightward shift of the demand curve increases both price and quantity. So when the demand curve shifts to the right, price is increased, which we see from $9 to $12, and quantity is increased, which went from 20 to 24. Did I do that right? Yep. Okay, let's talk about a decrease in demand. A decrease in demand, consumers are now willing and able to buy less of the product at every price. When the curve shifts left, there is a surplus. A surplus puts downward pressure on the price. To eliminate the surplus, the prices must fall. As prices fall, quantity demanded decreases along that new demand curve, and quantity supplied decreases along that supply curve. A new equilibrium point is reached. So let's talk through it with the graph. So let's assume that our demand curve shifted left because, say we have a decrease in consumer income. Okay, a bunch of people get laid off from their jobs, so there's not as much money to spend on pizza. So a decrease in the price of a substitute would also shift left, or a reduction in the number of consumers would also shift our demand curve left. So consumers are now willing and able to buy less of the product at every price. So our demand curve shifted to the left. The amount demanded at the initial price of $9 went from 20 million pizzas. Let me get my pen out. 20 million pizzas per week. When we shift left, it is now about 10 million pizzas per week. Because the producers supply 20 million pizzas at that price, we now have a surplus of 10 million pizzas. To eliminate the surplus, prices must fall with downward pressure on the price. That's a pretty good arrow. As the price falls, quantity demanded increases along the new demand curve. So our prices are falling, so along the new demand curve, quantity is increasing and quantity supplied is decreasing along S, our supply curve. So as our prices fall, so prices are falling, quantity demanded is increasing as we travel along this along this demand curve, and the quantity supplied is decreasing as we travel along this supply curve. Because remember, we learned when prices change, we travel along curves. We don't shift curves. Let's see, where was I? So as the price falls, quantity demanded increases along the new curve, and quantity supplied decreases along the supply curve until the two quantities meet at a new equilibrium point, which is $6. Let's erase everything. $6 and 16 million pizzas per week. As long as the supply curve slopes upward, which it always will in our case, a leftward shift of the demand curve reduces both price and quantity. Okay, if that's confusing, please rewind and look at it again or listen to it again. And then now just summarizing, okay? We went through it really in detail, but let's just do a quick summary. Okay, as long as the supply curve slopes upward, a rightward shift of the demand curve increases both price and quantity. As long as the supply curve slopes upward, a leftward shift of the demand curve reduces both price and quantity. So I tried to give you sort of an idea. So this is my supply curve, it's sloping upward. Okay, when demand shifts left, you go down the supply curve. Okay, price and quantity decreases. When demand shifts to the right, you go up the supply curve and price and quantity increases. Okay, now let's talk about shifts of the supply curve. What happens to equilibrium price and quantity if the supply curve shifts? A shift of the supply curve means that quantity supplied changes at each price. What could shift a supply curve? Okay, we talked about this last chapter, but let's just review it again to make sure that we're all on the same page. Anything really could shift a supply curve. Some examples are a reduction in the cost of a resource used to make pizza, such as mozzarella cheese. A decline in the price of another good these resources could make, such as calzones. A technological breakthrough in pizza production, such as a faster oven. A change in expectations that encourage pizza makers to expand production. Or an increase in the number of pizzerias out there. This is all would be an increase. If these shift, they could cause an increase in supply or a decrease in supply. So let's talk about an increase in supply first. An increase in supply, that means that producers are willing and able to supply more pizzas at each price. When the curve shifts to the right, now we're talking supply curve, when a curve shifts to the right, there is a surplus. The surplus forces prices downward. As the price falls, quantity supply decreases along the new supply curve, and quantity demand increases along the existing demand curve, and a new equilibrium point is reached. Oops, wrong way. So let's focus in and review that really quick. Not really quick. We will take our time, but we're still going to review it. So we talked about the 5 things that can shift a supply curve. So any of those changes shift the supply curve, but none of them will shift the demand curve. An increase in supply means that producers are willing and able to supply more pizza at each price. So our supply curve shifts to the right. After the supply curve shifts to the right, the amount supplied at the initial price, so if we look at $9, the amount supplied at the initial price changes from 20 million pizzas per week to 30 million pizzas per week. Producers supply 10 million more pizzas than consumers demanded. So the buildup of unsold pizzas frustrates the producers stuck with pizzas they can't sell at $9. So we have a surplus here, and that's going to force our prices downward. Okay, as the price falls, quantity supplied along this new supply curve changes, and we are now, our price drops to $6, and our new equilibrium gives us 26 million pizzas per week. So as long as the demand curve slopes down, and it's stationary, it's not moving, so as long as that demand curve slopes down, a rightward shift of the supply curve reduces price, but increases quantity. Okay? Oops. Turn off my pen. How about a decrease in supply? A decrease in supply, producers are willing and able to supply less pizza at each price. So when the supply curve shifts to the left, there's now a shortage. The shortage forces prices upward. As the price rises, quantity supplied increases along this new supply curve, and quantity demanded decreases along the existing demand curve. Therefore, a new equilibrium point is reached. So let's talk about that one again. There we go. So one of those determinants of supply changed in a way that shift our supply curve to the left. A good example, what if there was an increase in the cost of mozzarella cheese, or an increase in the price of another good these resources could make, or a decrease in the number of pizzerias. A decrease in supply means that producers are willing and able to supply less pizza at each price. So our supply curve shifts leftward. So if we look at $9, that was our initial price. Our equilibrium was 20 million pizzas per week. So our supply curve shifts left. That means at $9, we are now at 10 million pizzas per week. We now have, yikes, a shortage of 10 million pizzas. Producers supply 10 million fewer pizzas than consumers demand. That's your shortage, which drives the prices upward. As the price rises, quantity supplied increases. Let's erase that. As the price rises, quantity demand, let's rewind. I'm not sure what happened there. I apologize. So as the price rises, quantity supplied increases along the new supply curve, and quantity demanded decreases along the existing demand curve until now we have a new equilibrium point is reached. Okay, the new equilibrium point, that means our prices were rising. We're now to $12. And we come down here to $14. So the quantity decreased. As long as the demand curve slopes downward, that's our demand curve, we are sloping downward. A leftward shift of the supply curve, so we shifted this new supply curve to the left. Increased price, but reduces the quantity supplied. Let's turn this off. Okay, let's summarize that. As long as the demand curve shifts downward, so here's your demand curve, pretend there's a graph here, a rightward shift of the supply curve reduces price but increases quantity. A leftward shift of the supply curve increases price but decreases quantity. And we are done with 6.2.